Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The Halcyon Club's carpet was navy and overly quiet, the kind that teaches shoes to whisper. I let the revolving door carry me into a lobby trimmed in brass and orchids. The hostess checked a screen. Avery party of 5. That's us, Noah said, raising a hand like roll call. Sloane tightened an arm around each child. Big night, she told the hostess. Please seat us in gold. In moi. We passed the lounge and entered a room of chandeliers and practiced laughter. At the center waited a table with a brass placard, Gold Members. Sloane slid in first and arranged her napkin as if it were a credential. She flicked her eyes at me only after the hostess finished setting the 5th place. May, she said lightly, the club's strict about the gold section. Would you grab a spot in the lounge? We'll wave you over after appetizers. Noah shifted the bread plate a 1/4 inch. June stared at the water. Theo tugged his too tight tie. We have 1 reservation, I said, level, 5 seats. Sloane touched the placard with 2 fingers. House policy. To the hostess, children's menus and a champagne list, please. A server arrived with flutes and a leather folder tucked under his arm. He set the glasses down, palmed the folder onto the linen, and angled it toward the inside of the table. Sloane opened it, made a face calibrated for sympathy, and slid it 2 inches toward me, the way people push a pen across a bank desk. You've always been the generous one, she said. Could you cover the first round? Inside the sleeve sat a neat parade cocktails oysters, a porterhouse that had apparently introduced itself to my son as a good idea. The total read 3,000. I placed my hand on the folder to keep it from turning into theater. Not tonight, I said, closing it. Professor Rourke, a voice called. I turned. He was taller than when he'd come to my porch years ago begging for calculus help. Aiden Mercer, he said, offering a hand. Summit and Stone. He grinned at Noah. Your coach used to tell me to quit haunting your mother's kitchen. Best tutoring I ever got. She taught me EBTDA on a paper towel. Laughter loosened the air. Aiden looked around the table. Half my analyst class took her intro to finance. If you need anything, Mrs. Rourke, my team is here. He moved on, leaving the brass placard to shine less brightly. The hostess drifted away. Sloane examined the menu like a warranty. Noah exhaled. I slid my card into the leather, wrote an exact tip, and handed it back to the server. It wasn't magnanimity. It was a boundary purchased in quiet. When the receipt returned, I folded it small and slipped it into the tiny pocket of my purse that once held a kindergarten photo. I looked at my son long enough to say what needed saying without sound. He looked down, which he learned young. Enjoy your dinner, I said, and turned away. No speeches about rules, no remarks about gold. I walked back across the carpet. Outside, Riverton's night smelled like river water and the bakery that keeps late hours for marching band kids. Across the street, a neon sign in the diner window threw red and white onto the club's glass like an argument. I stood under the awning until Clone let go of my coat. Home sits 14 minutes from the club if you catch a green. I caught one. The radio tried to sell me a truck, then a mortgage. On my block, porch lights still mean hello. The Mendoza's banner for the Hawks fluttered over 2 bikes on the lawn. My mailbox leaned as it always has. The house exhaled when I opened the door. The kitchen greeted me with oak and familiar hums. The Mr. Coffee flashed 12 Hujre from the last storm. The refrigerator held up its magnets, a band schedule, a tire coupon, a crooked picture of June in a paper crown. I set my purse on the counter and removed the leather folder the server had let me keep by accident or kindness I didn't ask. At the table, I pressed the receipt flat with my palm. Paper makes a specific sound, in an old house a soft agreement. I dated the corner in tidy numbers and slid the page back into its sleeve. From the second drawer to the right of the stove, I pulled a notepad with the hardware store's logo. I wrote 2 words and drew a line beneath them, no subsidy. Steam rose when the kettle clicked. I made tea because coffee after dark argues with sleep. Through the window over the sink, I saw the reflection of my kitchen laid over the faint street. It's the mirror I use. My father used to say you learn more about yourself in glass that shows your life around you. I carried the mug to the table and let it cool. The house settled the way fields do after wind. A train somewhere put its long voice into the night and pulled the sound along with it. The phone waited on the counter, black and unremarkable. I didn't like how it looked at me like a door I wasn't opening. I put my palm on the table, then lifted it and touched the leather seam of the folder. The surface felt like an old wallet, useful, not fancy. I rose and rinsed the cup. The lemon oil from the cork coaster woke when water touched it. I wiped the ring dry and returned it to its circle. Small chores served as punctuation. On the fridge, June's paper-crowned photo was held by a magnet shaped like Ohio. I eased it off, looked at her gap-toothed grin, then put it back under the North Coast curve. I don't collect many things. I keep proof. I opened the drawer again, returned the folder to its spot beneath rubber bands and measuring spoons, and closed the drawer with my hip. The room was quiet enough to hear the stove clock keep the wrong time faithfully. I picked up the phone. The screen lit my hand. My thumb moved through names that have stayed the same longer than most businesses in town. I pressed 1. Bernice picked up on the second ring. "You sound awake," she said. "I am," I answered. "Can you come by in the morning? I'll bring coffee and that old leather ledger you hate." "I don't hate it. You hate what it makes you do." She arrived just after 8, coat unbuttoned, gray hair, clipped back the way auditors pin down stray numbers. She set a cardboard tray on my counter, 2 black coffees, and a paper bag that breathed cinnamon, and laid a long scarred ledger on the table like a carpenter laying out a level. "Let me see the thing that started your night," she said. I slid the leather folder forward. She pressed the receipt flat with her palm the same way she had once flattened a stack of invoices for a shuttered diner and found the one that mattered. 3750, she read, not as a grievance, simply as a fact. "Okay, let's count the rest." We pulled a plastic bin from beneath the sink. People keep different things under sinks: soap, old vases, boxes of light bulbs. I keep paper. Tuition stubs with the perforations still clinging, gas card. Statements with points that never got used. Hotel emails that say "thank you for your stay" when what they mean is "thank you for your card." She sorted by payee and year-tapping piles into order with a fingernail that clicked like a metronome. "Don't narrate, just pull," she said. "Let the paper talk." The kitchen smelled like warm spice and dish soap. On the radio, a farm report announced rain that wouldn't come until tomorrow. Bernice wrote clean columns in a hand the nuns had trained date, purpose, beneficiary, source. My name showed up in source each time, whether or not the money had come from me directly. There are a dozen ways generosity travels. At 10, we paused. She poured more coffee, handed me a cinnamon twist, and went back to total a naked list of numbers with a pencil that had lost its eraser. "You want sentiment or arithmetic?" she asked without looking up. "Arithmetic," I said. She underlined a sum. "All right then. You've been the stopgap for a long time, May. It won't kill anybody to learn where the gap is." I wiped crumbs from the table into my hand and carried them to the sink. The water hissed. I turned it off and called Javier. He answered on speaker, wind in his voice. "Professor Rourke." "Javier, can you stop calling me that?" "Not likely. I'm 2 blocks away. 10 minutes. He appeared in 9 in a navy suit with the kind of shoulders law school gives. He shook Bernice's hand. She had known him as a kid with a bent bicycle, then set a laptop on the table and clicked it awake. "What do you need?" he asked. "I need a structure that makes kindness measurable," I said. "Not punishments, not handouts. Something that holds." Bernice angled the ledger so he could see the columns. "She needs friction," she said. "Enough to make people push, not enough to grind the gears." Javier nodded. "A trust can do that. Spendthrift language keeps creditors and impulse at bay. Distributions tied to milestones, not moods." He began typing, not legalese yet, just bones. "We'll call it the Rourke Growth Trust. Independent trustee quarterly verification. Clear triggers for help, clear limits when help isn't earned." "Trustee?" I asked. "Summit and Stone," he said. "They're clean and close. Aiden's team knows how to handle small-town money without making it feel small." Bernice snorted. "He still sends me Christmas pears like I taught him fruit." Javier smiled and kept typing. "Milestones: complete a financial fundamentals course. Submit a 3-month budget with positive balance. Set up an emergency fund with automatic transfer. No new consumer debt for a full quarter. Repayment plans documented and adhered to. Distributions limited to tuition, rent. Support utilities, medical, business inventory with pre-approved vendors. No luxury purchases, no memberships. Add an education clause for the kids," I said. "Books, activity fees. No one goes without because adults are learning late." "Done." His fingers paused. "A no contest clause. If anyone challenges the trust, their share freezes." "Yes." He drafted for an hour while the house breathed around us. The old furnace sighed. A train stitched 2 sides of town together. From the street came a delivery truck's reverse chirp. When he turned the screen so I could read the document, looked like a bridge between banks, white space, black type span, and truss. "Distributions are not promises," he said quietly. "They're earned. The bank will require paperwork, not apologies. You'll sign here, initial here. Bernice can witness." I read. I imagined each clause pinned to my refrigerator beside June's paper crown, long enough for everyone to say its name aloud. I took the pen and signed the ink, sinking fast as if the paper had been thirsty. We set an early dinner. No candles, no pretense. I put water in glasses and straightened a stack of manila folders in the middle of the table: bank statements, the trust summary. A list of accounts with my name attached. Noah arrived first, hands in pockets apology, in the way his shoulders rounded when he stepped through the doorway. He kissed my cheek and sniffed the room like a boy checking for trouble. "Smells like coffee," he said. "It does," I agreed. Sloane came behind him with a heel hitting wood like a small protest. She glanced at Javier's briefcase and at Bernice's ledger and set her bag on a chair as if it might bite. The children weren't with them. "This isn't a trial," I said. "Sit down." Javier didn't stand. He stayed seated at the corner of the table, neutral as a notary, a folded set of forms beside his elbow. Bernice opened the ledger to a blank page and wrote the date in the top right corner like the beginning of any other workday. I placed 2 credit cards in front of me. Both carried my name, one in a script the bank thought looked friendly. "These close tonight," I said. I slid them toward Javier. He laid them on a form already labeled with the account numbers. Papers make particular sounds when they stop being theoretical. Sloane inhaled through her teeth. "You can't just," she started. "I can," I said, calm as I could make it. "Because I opened them. Even generosity needs a gate." Noah picked at the edge of a placemat. "Mom, you'll listen first," I said. "Then you can ask." Javier tapped the trust summary. "From this point on," he said, voice-even assistance runs through the Rourke Growth Trust. An independent trustee, Summit and Stone, will review requests and verify milestones. The document is designed to support stability, not image. We're measuring budget savings, debt reduction, completion of education steps. It's not punitive, it's procedural. Sloane folded her hands tightly. Her polish was chipped in a way that told a truer story than her outfit. "So, we apply for help like we're strangers. You document what you need and why," I said, "like adults." "You're our family," she said softer, and for a second the hard edge in her voice took a breath. "I still am," I answered. "I am just not a line of credit." Bernice's pencil scratched. She didn't look up. "The tallies don't care where feelings sit," she said, "but they leave room for them at the table." Noah finally met my eyes. I should have said something earlier. "We're not doing earlier," I said. "We're doing now." Javier slid 2 forms across the table. "Signatures to acknowledge notice of closure," he said, "and receipt of the trust summary." Noah signed first his name, the same clumsy shape it had been on his first library card. Sloane held the pen a second too long, then wrote carefully as if neat letters could argue with content. I collected the cards into a small paper envelope and pressed the metal clasp down with my thumb until it clicked. The sound carried more than its size. I set the envelope on the table between the water glasses. "You're cutting us off," Sloane said, not a question. "I'm cutting off the part that asked me to disappear," I said. "Help isn't a favor if it erases the person who gives it." She stared at the envelope like it might translate. Noah looked at the folders, at the ledger, at Javier's steady hands. Bernice closed the ledger and slid it toward me. "Record ends here for today," she said, as if we were balancing a warehouse instead of a kitchen. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small brass key on a worn leather tag. She set it beside the envelope. "For your little safe," she said. "I know you keep one." "I do," I said. "Use it." Nobody spoke for a while. The clock over the stove kept the wrong time determined. Outside, a kid on a skateboard clicked past the curb like punctuation. My kitchen held all of us without arranging what we felt. Javier stood. "I'll file tonight," he said. "The bank will have an officer call you to introduce the process in the portal. It won't be dramatic. It will be consistent." Noah reached for his coat. He didn't put it on. He draped it over his arm and looked at me the way he had when he was 9 and brought home a note about talking in class. "I'll figure it out," he said, which wasn't a promise, only a posture. "Good," I said. "Figuring counts." Sloane stood more slowly. The muscles in her jaw worked. When she finally exhaled, her shoulders let go half an inch. "I hate this," she said. "So do I said. "That's not an argument against it." They left without slamming the door. The house absorbed the closing click and put it where it keeps winter drafts and lost earrings. Bernice capped her pencil and slipped it behind her ear. Javier stacked the signed pages, squared the corners, and placed them in his case the way people put away instruments. "Text me if you change your mind about any clause," he said. "I won't," I answered. He nodded once and stepped into the hall. Bernice lingered fingers around the brass key as if reluctant to let it go. Then she pressed it into my palm, patted my wrist, and followed him out. I stood alone in the kitchen. The envelope sat in the middle of the table like a small, honest weight. I took it and the key to the cabinet where I keep the things that anchor a cigar box full of letters, the paper-crowned postcards with corny jokes my husband used to mail from job sites. I set the envelope in the back, turned the key in the tiny lock, and tested the handle once to feel refusal. On the counter, a single glass held a ring of water where someone's thumb had warmed it. I wiped it dry. Then I turned off the overhead light and left the room lit only by the window over the sink. The glass showed the dark yard laid over the faint double of my table, the empty chairs, the neat stack of forms, the brass key now gone from sight. In the other room, the phone lay quiet on the arm of the chair. I didn't check it. The house held its breath and then let it out the way fields do when wind passes and does not return. The call came mid-afternoon, a school number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Rourke, this is Nurse Ellison at Riverton Middle." June felt lightheaded during band and fainted. "She's awake. We can't reach her parents." "I'm on my way," I said, already reaching for keys. The nurse's room smelled like cotton and hand sanitizer. A poster above the sink showed a cartoon saxophone wearing a scarf in flu season. June lay on a vinyl cot, her hair sprung loose from his elastic cheeks, a shade too pale for her freckles. "Hey there," I said, kneeling so we were level. "I'm okay," she answered, voice scratchy. "Just sat down too fast." Nurse Ellison handed me a paper cup of water and a note with a list of signs to watch. "She needs food and a quiet evening. If symptoms return, urgent care." "Did you eat breakfast?" I asked. June looked at the linoleum. "Toast, no butter." "And lunch?" "They changed the menu to meatball subs. I didn't want one." We signed the checkout slip. In the car, she fixed her clarinet case between her knees like it might steady the rest of her. I started the engine and let the heater warm us without talking. On the way out, the crossing guard waved with a gloved hand as if greeting any ordinary errand. "Hungry?" I asked at the light. She nodded. I turned toward Harlan's Diner. The neon coffee sign hums there, whether it's morning or dark. The booths are red and cracked at the corners. The waitress calls everyone sugar, even if you ask her not to. We slid into a two-top under a framed photo of the 1999 baseball team. "What sounds good?" I asked. "Chili," she said, surprised by her own certainty. "And the cornbread with the little butter." "2 chilies," I told the waitress. 1 apple juice, 1 water. June cupped the apple juice in both hands. Steam rose from the bowls when they arrived, cinnamon and cumin climbing into the air like a memory. The first spoonful put color back in her. She ate without apology, half the cornbread gone before she looked up. "Grandma, is Mom mad at you?" The question landed with a thud, honest and heavy. "Adults have their own homework," I said. "It takes a while to finish." June studied the butter paper as if an answer might be printed on the foil. "A man came to the store yesterday," she said. "He asked Mom about boxes. She told him to leave, and Dad was quiet in the car all night. The chili had cooled enough to eat faster. I didn't." "Did you tell the nurse any of that?" "No. She had other kids." She folded the napkin into a small square. "You won't tell Mom I fainted because I didn't eat enough. I'll tell her you fainted and I picked you up," I said. "That's the truth she needs." The check came with a peppermint. I left the mint on the saucer and paid cash because today needed fewer moving parts. At the pharmacy next door, we bought a multivitamin that didn't taste like metal and a box of granola bars with a bear on the wrapper. At the grocery, I took milk, eggs, apples, chicken, rice, green beans, the kind of cart that says kitchen, not news. Back at my house, the porch light flickered the way it does when the bulb is almost ready to retire. June carried the eggs like a treasure and set them on the counter. I poured milk into a glass and pushed it across, then called Noah. He answered on the second ring. "You've got her. She's here. She fainted in band. She needs rest and a meal. He stopped himself before he could layer words over a problem already described. "We'll come by after 5. Bring Theo." I hung up. June leaned her clarinet case against the wall where the umbrella stand should be. She watched me peel potatoes like it might qualify as a sport. The house changed shape around us, quiet shifting from hollow to useful. I put the chicken in the oven and salted water to a boil. The clock over the stove insisted it was 12 when everyone knew it wasn't. I let it lie. On the kitchen table, I set 2 paper plates in the center, stacked not for use, my regular plates would serve, but for what they meant. June touched the edge. "Why do you keep those there?" "Because once your granddad and I ate spaghetti on the back steps, on paper plates when the power went out," I said. "We decided we could eat on anything as long as we liked who sat with us." June nodded like a person who doesn't yet know all the stories but knows where to find them. She took the vitamins without complaint. By 5, the air smelled like Sunday. Noah arrived with his coat half-zipped and Theo in a sweatshirt a size too small. Sloane came a minute later, makeup, slight eyes rimmed red, the way sleeplessness draws a line. "June," Noah said, hands on her shoulders, scanning without making a show of it. "You scared me." June rolled her eyes the way girls do when they love the person they're correcting. I scared the nurse more. We sat. I served chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans that clicked against the spoon. At first, the sounds were plates and forks and throat clearing, and a chair scooting an inch here or there. Halfway through a roll, Theo asked, "Can we have milk at our house tomorrow?" as if requesting a field trip. Sloane closed her eyes a beat too long. "We can," Noah said. "We will." Sloane set her fork down. The angle of her jaw softened. "I've been pretending," she said. She folded her napkin and unfolded it again. "At the shop. With the orders. With the front window. With how I stand at the register." She looked at the 2 paper plates without touching them. I don't even know when I started liking the reflection more than the thing. Noah stared at his palms like the answers might be written there. I kept quiet because quiet felt like kindness. "I won't argue," I said. I poured water for anyone whose glass sat empty. The room found a rhythm. Spoons, chairs, a small cough from Theo, the oven ticking as it cooled. Sloane cleared her throat. "Yesterday a man came for the boxes we never paid for," she said. He didn't raise his voice. He just wrote a number on a pad and set down a date like a book on a shelf. I pretended I had a call. He pretended to believe me. Her eyes were clear, not dramatic. The words weren't a plea for absolution, just accurate. That made them heavier. "We'll put the number in the ledger," I said. "Numbers don't get smaller if you stare at them from across the room." "I don't know how to start," she said. "You start at the table," I answered. I stood, carried a stack of manila folders from the counter, and set them beside the 2 paper plates. No portals tonight, no acronyms. Real paper, real ink. Noah shifted his chair closer to hers. "We brought the last 3 bank statements," he said, pulling folded pages from his coat. They were wrinkled in places where a pocket had tried to keep them private. I opened one folder, wrote budget on a tab with a black pen, and slid the statements inside. I wrote receipts on another, debts on a third, rent on a fourth. Theo watched as if I were labeling jars of candy. "We'll eat first," I said. "Then we'll tally what's on the table, not what's missing, not what should have been." Noah exhaled. "Okay." Sloane reached for the chicken, changed her mind, and reached for the green beans instead. She ate the way people do when they're afraid of not finishing. June nudged the bowl of potatoes toward her. The corners of Sloane's mouth flickered in something like gratitude. When the food went down and the plates looked like proof instead of promise, we cleared only what needed clearing. Sloane stacked plates by the sink. Noah ran water until it warmed. Theo stood on the step stool and handed forks like a solemn apprentice. I wiped the table to clean wood, then placed the folders where dinner had just been. "All right," I said, sitting. "We'll do one thing tonight, not 5, not 20. June took the black pen and clicked it ready like a timekeeper at a swim meet. I pushed the receipts folder toward Sloane. "This is where your shop goes," I said. "Inventory and inventory out, not decorations, not mood, units, costs, dates." Sloane opened her purse and pulled out a stack of slips folded small. The top one was from a shop that sells ribbon, the kind you can see from the street. She smoothed it with her palm, then the next, until a modest pile sat square. Theo slid the budget folder toward Noah. "Dad gets the boring one," he declared. Noah smiled with the side of his mouth he uses when he knows a joke is true. I picked up the pen and wrote the date at the top of a yellow pad. June sat to my right shoulders, grazing mine apple juice ring on her lip. "We'll sort by month," I said. "Stacks for January, February, March." I looked at the clock over the stove, the wrong time, faithfully wrong, and then at the window, the sky now holding the shape of the maple in a flat dark. "Small stacks," I added. On purpose. We worked without performance. Paper makes different sounds when it's being used. Instead of saved, the slide of a cardstock receipt against a cheap one, the tick of a staple under a fingernail. The soft sigh a stack gives when it learns its place. Theo spelled out months in block letters on the tabs. Sloane wrote store names in a narrow hand that belonged to a different life than sequins. Noah checked balances against the line that said available and said the numbers aloud, not loud, not proud, just clear. When we paused, the room didn't fill with a lesson. It filled with the tame noises of a house doing its job. The refrigerator clicked, the furnace breathed. Someone's phone buzzed face down on a chair and no one reached for it. I took the notepad with the hardware store's logo from the drawer and wrote one line under the 2 words I'd written the night before. "Feed kids before pride." I tore the page neatly and slid it under the magnet shaped like Ohio. The paper crown held steady under the North Coast curve. June leaned back in her chair to look, then returned to the table, picked up the top receipt, and read the date aloud, as if calling roll. We made 1 stack, then 2. The first pile stood an inch tall, honest and unspectacular. It stayed upright on its own. By Saturday, the receipts had learned to stack without wobbling. Sloane arrived early with her hair tied back and a sewing machine balanced on her hip like a child. "Outlet near the window," she asked, already scanning the light. "2-prong with an adapter in the drawer," I said. She set the machine on my dining table and tested the pedal. A thin line of thread lifted like a horizon. June filmed on her phone from the corner, saying nothing, catching hands instead of faces. Theo sorted buttons by color into old jelly jars. They had brought a tote of dresses that never fit anyone, odd sizes, patterns that looked better in a swatch than a window. Sloane ripped seams, pressed hems with my iron, and fitted simple bands of cotton where the waist used to give up. When she finished the first piece, she held it up to the morning light. It wasn't fancy. It was wearable. "What do you call it?" Theo asked. Sloane looked at the jar of buttons, then at the stitching. "Remade in Riverton," she said, not as a brand, just a sentence that made sense. June tilted the phone to catch the dress on a hanger against the maple beyond the glass. The tree had started to leaf clean green against gray sky. She made a short video that showed Sloane's hands and the unremarkable sound of thread sliding through a needle. No music, no text. The upload wheel turned and they went back to work without waiting to see if it mattered. At noon, Sloane wiped her palms on her jeans and looked at the clock that did not know the right hour. "I have to meet Mr. Halpern," she said. "Lease review." "Bring copies," I said. She held up a folder. The landlord's office sat above a shoe repair where a fan in the window moved air that didn't need moving. The lobby had carpet meant for patience. Sloane sat with her folder and her shoulders low, not small, just settled. When he called her in, she set the pages on the edge of his desk and didn't rush. "I missed payments," she said, as if reading an inventory. "I can't pay a higher deposit. I can pay this much today. Here's my cash flow for the next 12 weeks. Smaller inventory orders, quicker turns. If I fail, you can list the space with 30 days notice without penalty. If I meet these numbers by week 8, the overdue fees get cut in half." Mr. Halpern took off his glasses and folded them. He looked at the simple graph, a line that tried to climb without pretending it would fly. "Who wrote this?" "I did," she said. He tapped the paper with his knuckle. "Most folks bring a story," he said. "You brought math." He initialed the margin, drew 2 arrows, then reached for a handshake that felt like a truce. 8 weeks, he said. Back at the shop, Sloane moved the glittered mannequins into the storage room, turned the front window into a clean rectangle, and hung 3 dresses on plain wooden pegs. June stuck a small index card to the glass, with painter's tape remade. Sizes on the tag, no promises. The first customer didn't come that day. The second day, a high school girl pointed at a hem and asked if it could be shorter. Sloane measured, cut, and pressed while the girl did homework at the counter with a pencil that shed eraser crumbs. June filmed the hemline falling and the girl spinning once to check if it behaved. A third day, a woman from the clinic bought a dress for a niece and paid exact cash without looking for a discount tray. On Wednesday, the supplier called. "No more orders without prepayment," he said. His voice didn't accuse. It recited. "We can't keep floating you." "I can't prepay a big batch," Sloane answered. "Will you sell me 12 units at cost, plus 5 3-styles for each cod? If I pay on delivery for 2 cycles, we revisit terms." Silence held for a breath. "You'll have to pick them up," he said. "I'll bring a receipt book," she said. She borrowed Noah's truck and used moving blankets to keep boxes from bruising. She signed the carbon paper in duplicate and slid the pink copies into a folder labeled Inventory Paid. At the shop, she steamed the clothes one at a time and wrote the numbers in a notebook that didn't try to look like an app. Every night, she put the cash envelope in the drawer at home instead of the purse she couldn't keep track of. Every morning, she took a photo of the deposit slip in case the paper forgot her. Noah had his own assignments. The youth center smelled like sweat and popcorn salt. He carried a whiteboard from the storage closet to the corner by the drinking fountain and wrote 4 words: rent, food, bus pass, other. "Tell me where your money goes," he said to 3 teenagers in team hoodies, who thought they were only there to shoot free throws. They shrugged. He handed out envelopes and let them fill the labels in their own block letters. One kid wrote shoes in big, proud strokes, then crossed it out and wrote bus when his friend laughed. Noah didn't smile. He capped the marker and set it in the tray. He showed them a paycheck stub and circled the part that isn't keepable. He folded a 20 and slid it under the lip of the rent envelope and said nothing for a full 10 seconds so the quiet would do its job. When the gym door banged, he didn't look. He kept the marker in his hand like a coach holds a whistle and waited for the second silence, the one that sticks. At home, after the center closed, he sat at my table with the budget folder and said numbers aloud in the steady way you read to a child who wants the same story again. Sloane brought the receipt stack and laid today on top of yesterday. June and Theo checked dates and lined them up at neat right angles. The work learned how to be small and regular. Near the end of the month, a white envelope appeared on my table with my name written in the same careful block letters Theo used for months. Inside 5 10s and 2 5s. A note on ruled paper. "First payment, more to come." I put the cash in the trust file because that is where it belonged. I didn't clip the note to it. I kept the note. On a quiet Thursday, an officer from Summit and Stone stopped by with a card and a folder. She was younger than Aiden, polite, practical-eyed, a tie tucked into a sweater like someone who walks to work when the snow begins. She explained the bank's portal and the parts that weren't portal mail signatures, documents that prefer paper, and she asked if the kitchen table worked as a meeting place. It did. She looked at the 2 paper plates in the center, the yellow pad with a date at the top, the tidy stacks that sat uncrowded. She didn't comment, which I liked. At the shop, the window kept refusing to fill. Sloane let it. She wrote her prices in a narrow hand on cardstock tags, not to suggest scarcity, just to stay honest. When teenagers came in with $5 and hoped she measured them for hems that would wait until they had 10. When the clinic woman returned with her niece to show how the dress looked in real light, Sloane listened as if alterations were what the day had asked for all along. At home one evening, June set the phone on the table and showed a short video of Sloane's hands stitching a label into a placket. The view count had climbed without turning gaudy. Comments said simple things in plain words. One asked if there would be sizes large enough for a cousin. Sloane answered with measurements and didn't add a heart. Theo stuck a typed list of chores to the fridge with the Ohio magnet sweep. Sort buttons, take out trash. Feed cat, there is no cat, but the line remained. He put check marks with a pencil that dulled fast and smiled at his own columns. On Sunday, Noah brought 2 composition books from the dollar aisle and set them beside the folders. He didn't say what they were for. He wrote the date inside the first one and the word envelopes on the first line. Theo drew a box around it. The maple outside grew leaves you could tell from a distance. The train added its long voice whenever it felt like making the horizon true. The house remembered to be a house, clock's wrong kettle, right the sink taking whatever you gave it, and the table giving it back sorted. By the end of 4 weeks, the receipts stack had learned how to stay short. The inventory paid folder held pink slips with edges still serrated. The rent folder held the amended lease with Mr. Halpern's initials and a coffee ring from a cup he forgot on his own desk. The budget folder held a line drawn in pencil that didn't try to climb forever. It aimed for level and found it most days. No one announced anything. The day moved through its chores and put itself away. When I wiped the table that night, the cloth smelled like lemon and thread. The 2 paper plates in the center stayed where they were, edges a little bent from being moved, and returned not a decoration, not an altar, just proof that a surface can hold more than one kind of weight. The call came just after sunrise when the yard was still blue and the robins hadn't made up their minds about it. Bernice's neighbor spoke fast, and then slowed down, shortness of breath, ambulance Riverton General. I parked crooked and went in through the sliding doors that always stick. The hall smelled like antiseptic and linen carts. In room 214, Bernice lay with a cuff around her arm and a light on her finger hair flattened on one side, like she'd argued with the pillow. "Don't audit the monitors," she said, voice dry. "They're doing their best." I took her hand. It was cool and stubborn. "You scared me." "Good, I'm still effective." Her eyes went to the chair. "Purse." I handed it over. She dug until she found a thick envelope with my name inked straight across the front. "Open it." Inside sat a typed document, clipped square, a letter on heavier paper, and a check made out to a bank I already knew the smell of. She watched me read the first paragraph, then closed her eyes like someone who finally gets to sit during a parade she organized. "Cole Rourke Learning Fund," I said. "Don't say it like a headline," she muttered. "Say it like a task." The letter was simple. Scholarships for women in night classes at the community college. Workshops at the youth center. Books for the school's finance lab that still used worksheets from 2003. It named me as director not with a flourish, just a sentence that didn't blink. At the bottom, a condition in her hand, 5 years of hands-on mentoring, no delegation of the good parts. "You had this ready," I said. "I have drawers." She set her mouth. "Call Javier. Have him bring a notary seal that stains." Javier arrived with his tie askew and a portable stamp in a zip pouch. Aiden came in after him in a jacket less formal than bank floors prefer. He set a paper cup of decent coffee on the tray and stood back like family who knows not to take the chair. The nurse watched from the doorway as signatures found their lines and ink took its place. When the seal came down, it left a raised circle you could feel with your thumb. Aiden touched the edge of the document. "Summit and Stone will hold the funds separately. Quarterly statements at your kitchen table if you want them." "Kitchen table," I said. Bernice waved them all away with a small imperious flick. When we were alone, she exhaled through her nose as if the air itself had behaved. "Don't frame anything," she said. "Work it." "I will." "You'd better," she answered and closed her eyes without ceremony. 2 weeks later, the Riverton Chamber held its breakfast in the back room of the old brick hall where the ceiling fans ticked no matter the weather. The tables wore paper tablecloths and a salt shaker that jammed. On the buffet, eggs, sausage patties, fruit in a bowl that underestimated bananas, coffee strong enough to argue. Someone had set a podium near a banner that read, "Buy local," as if anyone needed to be convinced. The chamber chair cleared his throat and tapped the microphone once. He spoke about small cities that run on checks with memos that say, "For band trips and for light bill," and on folks who sign their names legibly because it matters. He called my name. The room clapped the way rooms do when they know you and still have to get to work. I walked up, took the plaque, and stood where the carpet had worn thin. I didn't make a speech. I thanked them. I mentioned the fund by name and said the kitchen would be the office. That was enough. We ate eggs and asked each other about gutters. At a table near the back, Noah poured coffee for Sloan and set a packet of sugar just within reach. June stole a sausage patty and split it with Theo. Aiden lifted 2 fingers from across the room. Bernice's chair stayed empty. A small napkin sat folded on its seat. The day after the breakfast, a knock came at my door, not urgent, not shy. Sloan stood on the porch in a soft blouse and quiet shoes, hair pulled back in a way that got out of the way. She held a cream envelope in the leather folder from the halcyon night, its edge smoothed by time in a drawer. "May I come in?" she asked. "You may." We stood at the kitchen table. The 2 paper plates sat in the center, as usual, edges bent patient. She set the folder down and slid the envelope on top. I opened it. A cashier's check, $3,750, the memo line blank. Behind it, the original receipt pressed flat, as if that could erase the night, which it couldn't and didn't need to. "I can't return what you covered," she said, hands at her sides. "I can only pay what I owe now." "You can do one better," I said. I laid the check beside the new file labeled Fund Local. "Let this be the first scholarship. Books, fees, shoes for someone's night shift in winter. No ceremony." Her eyes steadied. "Yes." We sat for a minute without pen or paper. The house carried the small sounds it makes when it approves a tick under the stovetop, a sigh in the vent, a robin deciding finally to go on with it. Sloane stood and we washed 2 cups that weren't very dirty. She dried. I put them up. When she left, she touched the folder once like a person who has read a thing and is done reading it. Sunday turned warm and then warmer. We moved the long table under the oak where the ground is flat enough for a board to trust. Noah hauled the sawhorses from the garage. Theo carried the salt and knocked it once to loosen it. June set out the ordinary plates and, without looking at me, placed 2 paper ones in the middle stacked, then adjusted them until they sat square with the grain. We ate what a yard wants. Chicken sliced tomatoes, beans in a bowl that sweated rolls that remembered butter. Neighbors waved through the fence slats and didn't ask why. They already knew. The wind went through the leaves in a way that made a canopy into a conversation. After the table held rings from glasses and crumbs like confetti, no one would sweep too fast. Noah set 2 composition books at one end. The covers were bent where a bag had taught them to bend. Sloane wiped the wood in small circles, careful around the plates in the middle. June wrote remade pickup hours on a card and tucked it into her pocket. Theo stacked forks with the tines in one direction because chaos doesn't need help. We didn't toast. We didn't pose. The quiet put his hand on the back of my chair and kept it there a while. A train pulled the horizon along until it felt finished. The maple gave us the shade it had. Paper shifted a little in the breeze and stayed. We built a table we can afford to be proud of. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.